While setting up the backyard for Thanksgiving, I overheard my brother telling my dad, "We all know he's the failure. We just don't say it out loud." I smiled, finished setting up, then announced that the house they were standing in was already sold, and they had 30 days to move out. Hey there, we're working hard to hit our first 1,000 subscribers. If you love true, emotional stories, hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. Now let's get into the story. Thanksgiving morning smelled like cinnamon candles and burnt stuffing, the kind of fake homey scent my mom always drowned the house in this time of year. I was out back, setting up folding chairs on the muddy lawn, trying not to ruin my sneakers. It should have been peaceful, but right as I was wrestling with a bent chair, I heard them. My brother's voice carried over from the porch, laughing, loud enough for me to catch every word without even trying. "We all know he's the failure. We just don't say it out loud." There was a grunt of agreement, my dad's voice, and then the sound of a beer can cracking open. I stayed bent over the chair for a second longer than necessary. Not because I was busy, because if I stood up too fast, I might have thrown it through the kitchen window. I didn't lose it, didn't even react. I just smiled to myself, wiped my hands on my jeans, and kept setting up. They thought they were safe here, untouchable, built into the foundation of this old house like termites. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I owned the ground they were standing on. Literally. 3 months earlier, I bought the house. Quietly, legally, through a shell company, after my dad's second mortgage tipped into foreclosure. They didn't even know it had been sold. They were standing inside my house, eating my food, sneering at me. And today, while we pretended to be a family for one more Thanksgiving, I was going to let them feel every inch of it. Inside, it was the usual chaos. Mom barking about oven temperatures. Dad half watching the game. My brother pretending to be someone important on his phone. I stayed quiet, just watching, letting the words from earlier echo around my skull. "We all know he's the failure." It wasn't even new. Just the first time they said it when they thought I wasn't listening. I thought about the work they didn't see. The late nights. The side hustles. The small wins that finally added up until I could pull off the only thing they ever cared about. Ownership. Stability. Power. It wasn't just revenge. It was survival. Dinner was worse. Microaggressions wrapped in cranberry sauce. Still working at that little company? At least you're consistent. Hey, not everybody's meant to be a big shot. I smiled, nodded, shoved stuffing in my mouth, and tasted nothing. They didn't want me to succeed. They needed me small. They needed me pathetic enough to make them feel big. And they really thought they had it locked up for life. That this house, this family, would always orbit around them. It wasn't some big plan. It wasn't a revenge fantasy I plotted out for months. It was one moment, one laugh, that pushed me over. After dinner, while we were still sitting there, bloated and half drunk, my brother cracked a joke about my car. "How's that Civic holding up, man? Still smell like failure inside." Everyone laughed. Even my mom wiped away a tear from her eye. That was it. I stood up, slow and steady, raised my glass. "Quick thing," I said, voice calm. "Thanks for letting me set up today. It meant a lot." They all smiled, expecting some sappy speech. Good memories. Warmth. Nostalgia. I gave them none of it. "This house," I said. "It's sold." Dead silence. Forks frozen halfway to mouths. My brother's smirk sagged. I pulled out the paperwork from my backpack, dropped it onto the table with a dull thud. Purchase agreement. Deed transfer. 30 days notice. Everything they needed to know, right there in black and white. Happy Thanksgiving. Silence stretched, so long it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. My mom was the first to speak. A soft, brittle, "What? What do you mean it's sold?" I didn't sit down, didn't blink, just nodded toward the papers I dropped on the table. "Sold. Closed. You've got 30 days. My dad barked out a laugh like he thought this was one of my dumb jokes. "Good one. Real funny," he said, glancing around like he expected everyone else to start laughing too. But no one did, because some part of them, deep down, knew. The panic was already bubbling under their skin. My brother leaned forward, arms crossed on the table, that smug grin still plastered on his face like it might save him. "You can't just sell Mom and Dad's house," he said. "That's not how this works." I shrugged. That's exactly how this works when they don't technically own it anymore. Their faces shifted almost at the same time, a weird mix of confusion and fear. My brother opened his mouth again, probably ready to throw another insult, but I cut him off. "You want to see the foreclosure notice?" The one Dad got 6 months ago. I pulled out a second folder and dropped it next to the first. It's all public record. Surprise. My dad's face turned an ugly shade of red. My mom just kept shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, no," over and over like she could rewind the clock if she said it fast enough. I kept my voice calm. I wasn't going to let them turn this into another family drama where I was the difficult one. This was business now. Cold. Clean. Final. You had time, I said, keeping my tone light. You had options. You didn't take them. I didn't say the rest out loud. That I could have saved them if they ever once showed me respect. If they'd treated me like a son, a brother, a human being. Instead of some perpetual disappointment they trotted out at holidays to feel better about themselves. But they didn't. And now? Now they got to reap what they sowed. The yelling started about 10 minutes later. My brother, first, predictably. You really think you're going to get away with this? You think you're some genius? I just sat there, eating pumpkin pie while he melted down. My dad slammed his beer down on the table so hard the can crumpled. You ungrateful little. We gave you everything. That made me laugh. A real, genuine laugh I hadn't felt in years. You gave me nothing, I said. Nothing but a front row seat to your disaster. My mom cried, of course. Begged me. Tried to play the guilt card so hard it almost hurt to watch. How could you do this to your family? We're blood. We're supposed to stick together. I didn't flinch. Funny. You only remember we're family when you need something. She kept crying, my dad kept swearing, and my brother kept threatening to call lawyers, even though he had no idea what he was talking about. It was chaos. Loud, messy, desperate chaos. But me? I was calm, cold, focused, because deep down, they all knew I wasn't bluffing. The eviction notice was already scheduled. The paperwork was airtight. The sheriff's department was ready if they decided to make this ugly. By the time I left that night, the house felt different. Colder, smaller, like the spirit had been sucked right out of it. I walked out without saying another word. Got in my failure car and drove off, while my brother screamed into the night air about how this wasn't over. Maybe it wasn't, but it was over enough for me. For the first time in my life, I was the one holding the cards, and they were finally the ones scrambling. The next morning, the text messages started. First from my mom. Long, rambling paragraphs about family, about mistakes made on both sides, about forgiveness. No mention of what they said about me. No apology. Just this desperate hope that if she pretended nothing happened, I'd cave. Then my brother, sending shorter, nastier messages. Threats about getting a lawyer, about how they were looking into this. Spoiler, they weren't. They didn't have the money for a lawyer. Hell, that's half the reason they lost the house in the first place. And finally, my dad. The simplest message of all. You better think long and hard about what you're doing. No punctuation. Just that ugly weight he always threw around like it was supposed to mean something. I put my phone on silent and went about my day. Because the truth was, there was nothing left for me to think about. I'd already made my decision months ago. They were just catching up. Here's how it happened, for anyone curious. 6 months before that Thanksgiving, I found the foreclosure notice tucked under a stack of junk mail on the kitchen counter. Accidental? Maybe. Or maybe they were just too used to ignoring problems until they exploded. Either way, it was bad. Payments missed. Interest rates skyrocketed. Auction scheduled. They were about to lose the house. And they didn't even seem to realize how close they were to the edge. I could have told them. Could have sat them down, explained everything, offered to help. But when I thought about it, really thought about it, the idea twisted my stomach. Why? Because even if I saved them, nothing would change. They'd still look at me like I was the weak link. Still mock me behind my back. Still pretend I didn't measure up to my golden boy brother, no matter what I did. So I did the one thing they never expected. I took control. I found a real estate investor who specialized in distressed properties. Worked with him to set up a shell company, all completely above board. Made an all-cash offer through the company so it wouldn't flag their attention. And when the paperwork cleared, I became the silent owner of the home they took for granted. I let them live in it like nothing had changed. I let them believe they were still kings of the castle. Until Thanksgiving. Until the right moment to flip the lights on and let them see what they'd really built. A hollow life, teetering on someone else's mercy. Mine. The funniest part was, they still didn't get it. Even after the announcement. Even after the papers. They kept acting like this was something they could argue their way out of. Like if they yelled loud enough, guilt tripped hard enough, I'd magically undo it all. They didn't understand that forgiveness wasn't part of the deal anymore. That door had been closed a long time ago. They just never noticed. 2 days after Thanksgiving, my brother showed up at my apartment. Uninvited, of course, pounding on the door like he was the landlord evicting me. I opened it just enough to look him in the eye. He was red-faced, breathing hard, fists clenched. "You think you're better than us now?" he spat. I leaned against the doorframe, calm as ever. "No," I said. "I've always been better. You're just finally noticing." He stared at me like he wanted to hit me. I almost wished he would. Would have made it easier. Instead, he shoved a finger in my face and growled, "This isn't over." I smiled. "For you, maybe." And then I shut the door. Soft. Final. The lies started almost immediately. I didn't even have to dig. They made it obvious. Apparently, according to the version my parents and brother were telling friends and extended family, this was all just a misunderstanding. Something about a paperwork error. Something about me being confused. Or, my personal favorite, that I was going through something and would come to my senses. It was laughable. Sad, even. They couldn't face the truth, so they just invented a new one and paraded it around town like a threadbare coat, hoping no one would notice the holes. A week after Thanksgiving, I got an invite to a family dinner. At first, I thought it was a joke. But nope. Full group text. All smiles, all casual. "Let's get together soon. Family is what matters most." Right. At first, I thought about ignoring it, letting them sit in their own fantasy world. But then I realized something. They weren't just lying to themselves anymore. They were trying to rewrite the story, turn me into the villain before the real fallout hit. Because once word got out they were getting evicted from their own house, they needed someone to blame. Someone convenient. Someone disposable. Me. So I decided to tell the truth. All of it. At once. I didn't show up to their fake dinner. Instead, I made a different kind of announcement. I sent an email, CCing not just my parents and brother, but every cousin, aunt, uncle, and family friend they had dragged into this mess. Attached, every document. Purchase agreements. The foreclosure notice they ignored. Receipts showing exactly how I bought the house, legally and cleanly, after they nearly lost it. A simple note at the top. Since there's some confusion, here are the facts. 30 days to vacate. No further discussion needed. Send. The fallout was immediate. Phone buzzing nonstop. Some people furious. Some stunned silent. Some, and this was the best part, whispering quietly that maybe it was about time someone knocked my family off their high horse. I wasn't the only one who knew how they acted. I wasn't the only one tired of pretending. Turns out, a lot of people had stories. Little insults. Big betrayals. The fake loans my brother never paid back. The promises my parents made and broke. They'd spent years building their little empire on arrogance. And now? Now it was all cracking apart. I didn't hear from my parents for 3 days after that email. 3 full days of blissful silence. When my mom finally did call, her voice was small. Not angry. Not righteous. Just small. "How could you embarrass us like that?" she whispered. I almost laughed. After everything they said. Everything they did. All the years of being treated like an afterthought. And this, being caught in their own lies, was what embarrassed them? I didn't argue. Didn't explain. Didn't justify. I just said, "You did this to yourselves," and hung up. They had 2 weeks left on the clock, and I was just getting started. 2 weeks left. You'd think they'd start packing. You'd think they'd cut their losses and leave with whatever dignity they still had. But no. Instead, they decided to get dirty. It started with a random call from a real estate agent. "Hey, just confirming. You're listing the house next week, right?" I blinked, confused. "I'm not selling it," I said. Long pause on the other end. "Well, your family reached out. Said they were preparing to list it and wanted us to handle the sale." I hung up without another word, because I knew exactly what they were trying to pull. If they couldn't stop me, they were going to confuse the situation. Tie it up in enough fake listings and fake offers that maybe, just maybe, they could drag things out longer. Maybe even get a judge to believe there was a dispute. Buy themselves more time. Classic play from people who think chaos is a winning strategy. So I made another move. I called the sheriff's department. Confirmed the eviction paperwork was still lined up and ready. Confirmed there would be no warnings. Confirmed they'd have an officer present the morning after the 30 days expired, if needed. And then I made a few more calls. The utility companies. The insurance company. The homeowners association. Every single entity that touched that property was informed, in writing, that I was the sole owner. No one else had authority to act on my behalf. If they tried to list the house, if they tried to claim squatters' rights, if they tried anything at all, they'd be met with a locked door and a sheriff standing behind it. The final nail came a few days later. My brother showed up at my apartment again. This time, he didn't bother pounding. He just stood there when I opened the door, hands in his pockets, staring me down. "You really gonna go through with this?" he said, voice low. I didn't even hesitate. Already did. He rocked back on his heels, looking older somehow. Smaller. "You know Mom's been crying every night," he said. "She's scared. She doesn't know where we're gonna go." There was a time that would have gutted me. A time when that guilt would have sunk its hooks in deep and dragged me right back under. Not anymore. "You should have thought about that," I said, "before you spent years treating me like a spare part." He didn't respond, just stared at me for a long time, like he was looking for some crack in the armor, some weakness he could dig into. There wasn't one. Not anymore. Finally, he shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. I watched him go, closed the door, and locked it. Not just the door to my apartment, but the door to everything they thought they could take from me. The 30 days ticked down, and when the morning came, they were gone. No goodbyes. No last-minute apologies. Just silence. The house was mine. Completely. Finally. The first night I slept in the house alone, it felt strange in a way I hadn't expected. There was no shouting from the living room, no footsteps stomping up the stairs, no slammed doors rattling the old window frames. For the first time in my life, the house was silent, but it wasn't the heavy, uncomfortable silence I used to know. It was a clean kind of quiet, like the house itself was finally exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I wandered through every room that night, just taking it all in. The floors still creaked under my weight. The paint still peeled a little in the corners where no one ever bothered to fix it. The memories were still there, but they didn't sting anymore. They were just memories now, harmless and distant, like old scars that stopped aching a long time ago. When I finally laid down in my old bedroom, it wasn't the same bed or the same beaten-down mattress I grew up with. I had bought new furniture, new sheets, new everything. It felt like drawing a line under the past, like putting a final period at the end of a long, ugly chapter. For the first time in years, I fell asleep easily. 2 months later, when Thanksgiving came around again, I decided to do something different. No family, no forced smiles, no pretending everything was fine while resentment festered under the surface. Instead, I hosted my own Thanksgiving, in the house that used to belong to the people who never believed in me. The guest list was small, just a handful of friends who had been there through the worst of it, people who never once treated me like I was less because I didn't live up to someone else's idea of success. We didn't have a formal dinner with place cards and china plates. We grilled steaks on the back patio, drank too much cheap beer, and let music blast through the open windows until the neighbors gave us dirty looks. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. And for the first time, the house felt like home. Somewhere between the second round of burgers and the third terrible attempt at karaoke, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The hurt was still there, buried under the surface, but it didn't control me. It didn't weigh me down every time I thought about my parents or my brother. They didn't win. They never did. They just convinced themselves they had, because it was easier than admitting the truth. I didn't need an apology from them. I didn't need closure or understanding or some grand reconciliation scene. I had something better, a life they couldn't touch anymore. As for them, I heard through the grapevine that they found a rental house about 45 minutes away. Nothing like the house they lost. Smaller, older, definitely not in a neighborhood they used to brag about living in. My brother bounced from one dead-end job to another, blaming everyone else when things didn't work out. My parents kept up appearances for a while, but even that started crumbling when people stopped buying their version of the story. They tried to spin it, of course. Tried to tell anyone who would listen that they chose to downsize, that they were simplifying their lives. But everyone knew the truth. No amount of spin could cover the fact that they had built their entire identity on something they couldn't even hold on to. I used to wonder if it made me a bad person to feel satisfied when I thought about that. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized it wasn't satisfaction. It was freedom. They spent years making me feel small, making me believe that no matter what I did, I would never be enough. And in the end, They lost everything trying to protect a house that they never even bothered to see slipping away. I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I just stopped saving them from it. If that makes me the bad guy in their story, so be it. I'll take it. Every single time. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.